Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan. Welcome everyone to Friday Night Live, episode 123. I apologize for the delay. Many of you guys have been waiting for a while, and I most would like to apologize to my guest who's been waiting for quite a while also. Typically, people make me wait. I don't usually try to make people wait, but this situation got really bad where I had Shaykh Mohammad Elshinawy waiting for me to arrive. No excuse, but I apologize publicly, shamelessly, in front of all you guys. How are you guys doing? I hope you guys are well. Inshallah, you guys are enjoying your Friday. You guys are safe, healthy with Iman. We have a very important topic tonight, and it's about enjoying the religion with reasoning, recognizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through depth. All of us and many of us who tune in are most likely Muslims from birth. Our parents were Muslims, and there are a few who are joining, mashallah, the brothers and sisters who converted, who researched, who studied, whose their fitrah brought them towards Islam. And inshallah, tonight we will be joined by a very honorable brother, scholar, who is also a researcher at Yaqeen Institute, Imam in Allentown Masjid in Pennsylvania. Please welcome him, ahlan wa sahlan, author, Shaykh Elshinawy. Ahlan wa sahlan, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Shaykh Abdullah.
How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, I was doing well until you kept me waiting and you kept the audience waiting, and then you show up and you praise yourself about usually being punctual. I don't know, Shaykh.
No, I'm not punctual, but on the live sessions, I try to make it like latest, like 8 minutes late. Like, how late can you be to your computer? Like, you're late to a flight, you're driving somewhere, but you just have to get your computer open, turn the lights on. Bam, it's 2 minutes. But no excuse.
You were building suspense because of the special topic. I get it.
No, it's not valid. If someone else made me wait 10 minutes, I would just check out. But you were so humble. You waited, and then you called Mufti Abdul Wahab, and he called me. And it's been like Fridays it's wild. It's like a roller coaster, and then you think you're almost done, and then at 10 o'clock, 9:30, Friday Night Live starts, and you're like, you're not done. When you're trying to wind down after Isha, you're like, so it is what it is, and I don't complain about it.
Let's all you do, Sheikh.
No, wallah, it's such a beautiful feeling to stay engaged in something good, and I know you enjoy it too. But again, I apologize to you, Sheikh, for making you wait.
No, man.
But I person like you, I can imagine you have so much adhkar, so much Quran, so much tilawa, awrad, that you wanted the extra 10 minutes so you could just finish. So I'm sure
I was finishing my 300 rak'ahs as I was waiting for you, Sheikh.
You did your salat al-tasbih, istikhara, you did istikhara for me.
Of course.
In the whole Allentown community that's thinking about buying a house, you were thinking about should they die?
MashaAllah.
What's going on, Sheikh? How are you?
Alhamdulillah, very well.
Where are you? Are you in town at home?
Yeah. This is my my room.
MashaAllah. So you're with your kids. That's great, man. It's always great to be home, especially on busy schedules that you have.
Jazakallah khairan.
I'm sure you cherish it. How was your khutbah today? What were you talking about?
I spoke about Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu an as a proof for the truth of Islam.
Beautiful.
As a proof of Islam.
As a hujjah, basically. How'd you get that idea?
How Islam redeems
Where did that come
people.
From?
Well, on one side, how Islam redeems people. Umar radiallahu an, you would never think that he would lead the world because he wasn't even supposed to have a grave. According to some historians, he was probably supposed to die on the side of a hill somewhere.
Wow.
He was a heavy drinker, always getting into fights. So he was either going to get intoxicated and fall off a cliff, or he was going to pick a fight with the wrong guy and his tribe was going to come over and take him out, right? That's the expectation, that Umar was not supposed to live to see 30 years old, let alone lead the nations of the world. And so that shows you so much about the power, the transformative power of Islam.
Wow. I love that topic of Umar ibn Khattab. Once I was thinking about how, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about izzah, turidun al-izzah fa inna al-izzata lillahi jami'a wa lillahi al-izzatu wa li rasulihi. But that concept of Allahumma izz al-Islam bi Umar ibn Khattab. Like, a lot of us have benefited from Islam as consumers. but Umar al-Khattab, mashallah, a contributor to
Allahu Akbar.
the cause, But that's a beautiful topic. And this evening, Sheikh, I would like you to lead this topic off. And I'm sure you've written about this and talked about this, and especially the research that you've done with proofs of prophethood, the work that you've done, the book that you guys have published at Yaqeen, and the work. It's just phenomenal. So I want you to go ahead, Sheikh, lead the way. And if there's anything that comes to my mind, I'll just interrupt.
Allah barik fiik. To be honest, I think the most productive way to go about this, especially that much of our audience is likely non-specialist, probably not very fond of, neither am I, of philosophy, or at least not seasoned and trained in it, because there's two routes to take here. If our topic is reason and revelation, the office of reason, where does logic fall and where does logic falter? How to set this up. This is a subject of like epistemic soundness. Like epistemology is how you know what you know, right? And that's a branch of philosophy, and so if you're interested in that, I'll refer you to books like Dr. Carl Sharif At-Tubgi's book on reason and revelation. I don't want to go through that route, and our very rich history as Muslims of how we engaged, other civilizations, other schools of thought on the faculty of reason. Like when Greek philosophy came over into the Muslim Ummah, Greek logic, introduced itself or got translated into Arabic, and the Muslim scholars had to engage with it. They took different routes on how to engage with it, some better than others, right? There are the Muslim philosophers per se. There are those that kind of try to revise a bit of the constants of Islam, of course, like the fitna of the Mu'tazila, the Mu'tazilite, sort of tribulation, turmoil, inquisition sometimes. And then there were, those that were Sunni inclined.
When was the interest peak of Islam in reasoning, especially in the theology discussion?
So, during the obviously, so after the Sahaba, for those that want like a very basic timeline, after I just said I'm not going to get into it, Al-Ma'mun Al-Abbasi, the Khalifa Al-Ma'mun, he was credited with spearheading the mass translation of Greek philosophy into the Arabic language. And, that's why some of the scholars even said, I don't think Allah will forgive Al-Ma'mun for what he did, just unfiltered, because, it sent everyone in like a scramble, all different directions. And, a lot of it was, like, I know I'm sounding a little bit hyperbolic here, but so many of the greatest top-notch thinkers, even within Greek philosophy, they wound up at very different conclusions, very conflicting conclusions, very nihilistic, even like hopeless conclusions. Like when Socrates says at the end of his long life that the only thing I know is that I don't know, that's just not very promising. It's, wait, so why am I doing this again? Why am I learning from you again? Not to say there's no value there whatsoever, right? But it needed such a filter that being, mass transmitted into the ummah caused a lot of intellectual turmoil, long story short. Yeah. But what the direction I think that would be healthier for our brothers and sisters listening in on this is the concept of, is there a place for rationale, for reason, for logic, for common sense in Islam? Because on the one hand, we live in the modern times that don't have really like popular thought. There's not much respect or regard for religion. And the ultimate reference point is the human intellect, right? And then on the other hand, you have also an opposite extreme of saying, we have the revelation. Don't try to use your logic with revelation, right? God's is the ultimate reference point. And both of those extremes have a great imbalance. Like on the one side, when you say the human intellect, it needs to make sense to me. Well, why you? The human intellect is not this sort of like one undifferentiated category. Who makes sense to who exactly? Me or you or the guy West or the guy East or the guy pre-modern or the guy postmodern? And like, if you were to go to someone just in 2023 in Republican states versus Democratic states, the ideologies that are prevalent there, all people think this is common sense. That's why we follow this. But it's not. Clearly, it's not that common. because you guys are at war with each other. The moral debates rage on. And so also, like a long time ago, if people were to say it is a given, it's like a undeniably rational to believe in a God, you're crazy. We're not even going to address you if you don't believe in a God, right? And nowadays people are trying to say, like, you believe in a God, like, are you crazy? It's common sense. There's no God, there's no tooth fairy, so they bundle it up also with so common sense isn't as common as we think. And but on the other hand,
is it possible
they get rid of sensibility? At the end of the day, one of the 5 objectives of the Sharia is al-aql, right? The intellect. At the end of the day, all the scholars of the schools of Islamic law, traditionally Sunni, Sharia compliant, Quran and Sunnah, they use al-adilla al-naqliyya. They have 2 types of evidence: the naqliyya, the textual evidences, and al-adilla al-aqliyya, the rational evidences. So there's clearly a central place for the intellect in Islam, but not in the runaway rogue form that we have nowadays. So we got to figure out our place. How do we be grateful for the intellect without being overconfident in our assumption of what the intellect can bring us to? You know, Allah says in the Quran, it's very beautiful actually. Wallahu akhrajakum min butuni ummahatikum. Allah pulled you out of the wombs of your mothers. La ta'lamuna shay'an. You don't know anything. Okay, so how do we know stuff after we came out knowing nothing? وَجَعَلَكُمُ السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَارَ وَالْأَفْئِدَةَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. And we granted you hearing. And the scholars say this is a reference to revelation, right? And naqliya, it's reported to us. We heard revelation, right? To the messenger or the messenger of the messengers, that sort of thing, right? And naqliya, sama'. We gave you hearing. He said, I gave you sight. Sight is like sensory perception. It's like the science, basically, right? The 5 senses, the science, the empirical data. So I gave you sight. Wal af'ida, and we gave you intellect. So think of it as reason now, logic. He gave you all 3. They're all from him to be used harmoniously. And it says, I gave you like hearing and sight and intellect, la'allakum tashkurun, so you may be grateful. So we're grateful for all of this, and we benefit from all of this, but we have to figure out how to put everything in its proper place.
That's unbelievable. This is, you know, one of the things that you were speaking, I almost interrupted you, was it hasn't the church and the religious institutions made it difficult for people to even believe in God sometimes when they start, you know, denying the facts, realities. So people start to have this heavy level of distrust, like they don't trust the institution of religion anymore. And Yaqeen talked about this in Reality of God and in the 17th century, 16th century, in some of the articles. That is also what I see, like people become skeptical of religion. And now you're religious, that means you're stupid. That means you didn't think hard enough, or you were just falling blindly. Look at, we saw in the past where any scientists that would come in the past say something contrary to religion, they would execute him, they'll kill him, right? So that happened in the past. And then so a lot of the reasonings, of course, you have the great philosophers from the Muslim community, Faryabi, you have Kindi and Ghazali, and these type of people. Great work. And the way you said it, Islam, the naql aspect, which is the textual aspect, you know, and people will coin it different ways, tradition, conservative, whatever, you know, followers, muqallids. And then you have a lot of people, even in America, Canada, in this trend that is even in Arab countries now, and Muslim countries like Pakistan, where if you studied a little bit of something, you know, like you know what I find something very interesting, some of the most successful people, whether it's in the army of a country or in the economically or any other science, they've done well. They don't feel satisfied speaking intellectually in their topics. They have to bring Islam in their discussion, because if somebody criticizes the government, the economy, there are a lot of criticisms. You know, no one thinks you're smart, because even the government thinks they're wrong sometimes. So like, we have no choice. But when someone starts to question the Quran or the Hadith, it makes the listener feel this guy has the audacity, the authority to question something so authentic. And now this person is portraying himself as someone intelligent. But Aks, he's an idiot. Just to, like, excuse me for my late man language, but this is.
You meant that his intelligence was questionable. That's what you meant.
Mean, this is the other language. I know a little bit of French, so I would say idiot. You know, excuse my French, but the reality is that's the level of this lack of understanding and people following these people online, and anytime they bring up reasoning and argument, you talk to them, rationalize with them, they somehow break their own principles, and they, oh yeah, yeah. I have some people that would say, don't talk about the past, don't talk about the Muslims' legacy. Look at the Muslims now. Let's reason failures, democracies collapse in Muslim communities. Where are we moving ahead? We're dependent on the West. This is a sign. To just thinking like this makes them so colluded. And I feel like this reasoning discussion is important. So
Yeah.
go ahead, Sheikh.
Yeah, I mean, we need to be honest, and we have been at the back of the train for a long time now. And I think, it was a game changer for me when I read. I hear the translation is pretty good in English, but I read it in the original Arabic, which was Sheikh Abul Hassan al-Nadawi rahimahullah's "What the World Lost by the Collapse of the Muslims." Yeah, beautiful book. It has actually a beautiful story behind it as well. Maybe for a later time.
Is that the story in Syria?
Yeah.
Oh, hush.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Such
say
a
it,
good
man.
story.
Go ahead, say it.
Say it?
Yeah.
Sure. So Abu Hassan Nadawi rahimahullah was like a polymath of a scholar, or like he was like he was fluent in 4 different languages, and so he wrote this book to explain to the world how we got here. Because if you can't explain how we got here, you're gonna fall into the trap of what everyone else is saying, which is religions hold us back. Which is true. The Christian religion held the Western world back, and so when they let go of the Christian religion, they moved forward. I'll come back to that point. But Abu Hassan Nadawi wanted to tell no, actually the world lost a lot by the Muslims forgetting their deen and taking the back seat. Wow. So he wrote this book on the rise and fall of Islam, and he wrote it in Arabic, but he pulled from sources of 4 different languages. So he sent it to the publishers. The publisher sent it back and said, no, we need references. We need references from the original languages, because they didn't believe he knew 4 languages. So they said, we need like you to actually go to the sources and make sure these are the actual references for the footnotes. And so I was like, yeah, I got them. And he put it all there and he mails it. Of course, it's like snail mail, right? So he mails it back to them, and he doesn't ever hear from them again. He doesn't even know that his book was approved and published. And then he goes to like some sort of like diplomatic meeting or like UN sort of after dinner party, something. And he meets like an envoy or an ambassador from Syria. And he tells him, where are you from? He says, I'm from India. He says, oh, India, you guys got some great scholars there. I just read this book called The Rise and Fall of Islam by some guy named Nadawi. And he's telling Nadawi that I read your book. And then he's like, really? And then he says, so I borrow my own book from the Syrian diplomat. So it's pretty cool. A beautiful story.
Yes, it was a beautiful, and the humility in Shaykh Abul Hassan Nadawi rahmatullah.
Yeah, rahimahullah.
I love. I mean, people should read it in English and Arabic also, but Rijal Fikri wa Da'wah. Rijal Fikri, when I lose himma, like when I have some lack of courage and service, I of course Quran will be my first source, but Surah Tawbah particularly. Whenever I'm like, man, I need some motivation, just get to Tawbah. Number 2 is Ulu al-Himma اللي في صلاح الأمة, which is really good. And then Rijal Fikri, then Rijal Fikri wa Da'wah. These people, they put so much work, and you just gotta read these people, and you're just kind of like, wow, what's going on? Go ahead.
There's a book called Ulu al-Himma that was written by Dr. Muhammad Ismail Muqaddim. It's been translated into English. The title is Fiery Ambitions. And there's a story behind that book that the book you referred to, when he realized the author of Fiery Ambitions, alhamdulillah, I enjoyed it. I had the honor of translating it. It's available in English.
Wow.
So when he heard that Salah al-Ummah fi ulu al-Himma, rectifying the Ummah through giving them lofty ambitions, that you're referring to by Al-Affani, he heard that Al-Affani's putting it together. He said, oh, never mind. I'm going to keep my book nice and short. And Al-Affani always kills it when he does research. And Al-Affani's book in Arabic is like 14 volumes. So he wrote like basically a summary, and that one's in English. So go read it. But Sheikh, can I bring it back to reason and revelation?
Go ahead.
So An-Nadawi rahimahullah said, you got to realize, or else you're going to think this religion of Islam holds us back the same way the religion of Christianity held us back. No, religion of Christianity was a man-made religion made by men in like medieval times or right? and therefore it was bound to be short-sighted, bound to become obsolete, bound to get outdated and get trashed.
Wow.
And so that's why when they let go of the man-made religion, they were able to advance as men. The Enlightenment, the Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution, scientific advancement to the end of it. He says Islam was a very different experience. Muslims were ahead of everything because of their Islam.
Wow.
And when they lost their Islam, that's when they fell back. So we have a very opposite experience. So you can't make that, you got to be careful. Also, it's also unfair. I'll make one last point to compare the Muslims of the 10th century or 12th century with the non-Muslims of the 20th or 21st century, because every people build on the people before them, right? So naturally, the Muslims discovered the compass. You know, we brag about it. And so people now say, we want to hear about the compass. We got GPS. Yeah, but you would have never gotten the GPS without the compass. Like, naturally, you're supposed to have the GPS because we're all building on each other. However, we will concede that the competition now has become lopsided because the Muslims not are on their deen, rather the opposite, because the Muslims have dropped the ball on their deen.
Wow.
So that's one aspect. But the other aspect is the Western world, yes, has progressed and yes, has advanced intellectually, scientifically, technologically, medically, fine, without religion. Okay. The human intellect, once again, Allah said, it's ways to know things. It's ways to know things through the empirical, through the senses, through the scientific process, through investigation. But we also missed out on a lot of different things, right? Like in the last 100 years, since they've sort of moved away from God, when Nietzsche wrote God is Dead and Thomas Arnold wrote his famous poem, you know, God's Funeral, Wal-'iyadhu billah, and sort of the atheistic tilt continues, or the atheistic lifestyle. People aren't really atheists. Very hard to find a true materialistic atheist that only believes it's like energy, matter, or material. You don't really. People act this way. They ignore God, but they deep down inside they say at least, yeah. I'm not saying he's not there. I'm just saying
there's always a supreme power above.
So I'm gonna ignore it. But the last 100 years when we've gotten to that godless lifestyle, godless, global culture. Are we better all around? No, we're not. We've killed more people in wars in these last 100 years than all of human history combined, right? In the last 60 to 75 years, the death by overdose and the death by suicides, these things are tripling, quadrupling. The antidepressants are up 400, 500%, right? We're not doing great at all. Racism is rearing its ugly head in different forms everywhere we go, prejudice and bigotry and apartheid. So, the religions of the world have actually restrained different religions in different ways to a considerable extent. So many of the atrocities we are able to do nowadays, right? And so we want to keep that in mind, that our idea running the show, it's interesting that a long time ago they used to worship idols, and then they get sick of the idol and go buy another idol, or they get hungry and they eat up their idol that was made out of dates or something, as the story goes.
Yeah.
Nowadays, we're worshiping ideas. Idols and ideas almost sound alike. There's like idolatry, and now there's ideology. And these ideologies now are worshipped. Like, I think whatever I'm thinking right now is ultimate truth. Then we're going to throw it out and grab another one, depending on the news cycle, the fashion cycle, the music cycle, the whatever it may be. And this enough is the Muslims, alhamdulillah, we are not anti-logic. But if there's clear-cut, undeniable logic, clear-cut, undeniable scientific proof, right? That will never conflict with a clear-cut component of Islam. That's what we're trying to say. That's what Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah did. He says, look, it's not about reason or revelation. It's about we have revelation and we have reason. The things that are crystal clear from reason never clash with the things crystal clear from revelation. But that's actually just a rare thing. When do you have something crystal clear from reason? You don't. It's less than you think. It's not as often as you think. And Allah humbles us to not think we know everything. The whole Quran is about that. You think you know why there's evil in the world, or that there shouldn't be evil in the world? Read Surah Al-Kahf. These evils happen, right? The boat being punctured and the boys sort of being killed, and you just didn't get it. There was a bigger picture, right? The angels ask, why is there going to be bloodshed on earth? I know what you don't know. So the Quran tells us appreciate the intellect, but also says have intellectual humility. Tone it down, or else you're going to, because if you only accept what you think, not know, what you think is right, what makes sense to you, then your God is not Allah. Your God is your intellect. Right? I'm only going to accept what makes sense to me. Well, that means you're the most wise then, right? But you're not. Allah's the most wise. And by and large, Muslims have been spared of this stuff. Like when we get on these ideas about, I don't know, sex is fine so long as there's a little magical word called consent, and so long as there's a magical number called 18 years old. Right? We've been on that trip for a while, but now let's look at us. Look at sort of the emotional trauma of failed relationships. Look at the sexually transmitted diseases. Look at how many babies we murder, late-term abortions all the time. All of this, right? All these ideas. The ummah has been spared of this. Whether you can see it or not, whether it's obvious or not, whether it's immediate or not, zina is harmful. Therefore, it is prohibited for our own good, whether we can make sense of it or not. Even I don't want to rant here, Shaykh, but it's so beautiful how the Quran gives you examples of this. Like in one example, Allah says that they couldn't understand, or they claimed, Allah knows best, that they couldn't understand why riba was haram. Right? إنما البيع مثل الربا. The Quran says, and they dare say, selling is just like interest. How did Allah respond? He didn't say, well, technically the difference is, he said, وَأَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَى. You know what the difference is?
Yes,
Allah, meaning humble down, right?
Yeah.
Allah made sale permissible and made interest impermissible. Whether you can appreciate why interest is dangerous, the way Aristotle did, by the way, the way Plato did, by the way. We're not going to wait till everybody has the sharpness of Aristotle and Plato's mind on this subject to accept the ruling. Do yourself a favor, just trust the Lord of the world, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you guys are proud, balanced, committed Hanafis. So let me use a good Zabiha example. May I?
You may. You're going to get me hungry.
Allah Azza wa Jal said in Al-An'am, وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا مِمَّا لَمْ يُذْكَرَ اسْمُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ, and do not eat whatever Allah's name has not been mentioned over. وَإِنَّهُ لَفِسْقٌ, it's a grave evil to do that, to eat something where Allah's name is not mentioned on. But here's the part I want, the next part of the ayah. وَإِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ لَيُوحُونَ إِلَىٰ أَوْلِيَائِهِمْ لِيُجَادِلُوكُمْ وَلَئِنْ أَطَعْتُمُوهُمْ إِنَّكُمْ لَمُشْرِكُونَ. And the devils are suggesting to each other ways to debate with you, and if you give in to their fancy language, you are mushrik. You have set equals with God.
Wow.
It's equals with God to eat non-zabiha? No. It's set equals with God to accept their logic, their idea, their rationale.
Wow.
In a way that overturns God's revelation. You see, what they were doing was, bright idea. It sounds nice. It actually sounds logical for a second. They say, you Muslims are funny. You guys contradict yourselves. What you kill with your hands, zabiha, you call it halal. You say it's fine. But what God kills with his hands, like something on the side of the road, right? You call it haram. That's ridiculous. So you see where they're coming at him. Like,
yeah.
So Allah didn't say technically and this, that, and He said, listen, if you want to entertain their logic, then you have put them on equal footing with God, if you will. You've put you're mushrik. So even if you don't eat the meat, but you accept that it's halal after I said it's haram,
that's fascinating.
then you have another God. You have a bigger problem than non-zabiha. You have a shirk issue.
Wow, that's a threat. I mean, even what you said something about Aristotle's approach to riba. What was his approach? I'm interested in what did it?
So, what is the problem with interest versus sale, right? Imagine we have this phone. I buy it for 10, sell it for 11. That's called sale. That's called profit. That's halal. Okay.
You know why I'm asking you? You know why? Because recently, I'm sure you've been in England multiple times. We were in England and we had a good sit down with Waheed, and Junaid, the CEO of Waheed Invest. These are great company, they're great people. And man, this guy is on war against riba. Like amazed, like the way that
I'm not familiar with their model, but I trust you.
yeah, and they like that's the whole thing. Like they have this investment portfolio, you know, $890 million. They got Khabib and Islam Makhachev on the
Right.
panel. So, but the reality is, it's just like, man, the way he was economically, not even from a religious perspective, the harms of it. Go ahead.
That's the thing. Like Islam, قل إنما حرم ربي الفواحش ما ظهر منها ما بطن. My Lord only forbids evil things, whether apparent or hidden. So when Allah says something's haram, He's making it very clear to you that it's not like an arbitrary exercise of power here. A'udhu billah. Allah does not, operate like this. If that term is even used,
the logic doesn't make sense to people because, like, man, look at.
But he points out that ما ظهر منها ما بطن. I'm only making the bad stuff haram, but some of this haram is batan. It is subtle. So just keep that in mind, oh human beings. That's the idea. So in sales, I'm buying this for 10, and then after I own it, I'm selling it for 11. That's called a sale. That's halal. In the riba model, I can't buy this for 10. So someone's gonna buy it for me with 10, hand it to me, and make me pay them 11. So you think it's the same thing. It's like 10 for 11, but it's a big difference. The difference is, from a rational perspective, that when you admit a third party in the transaction, the financier, the lender, right? You're separating basically merchandise, goods, from money. Money is making money. The lender is not owning it for a second even, right? Wow. And therefore, he doesn't own or shoulder the risk. And so what happens is, when you're able to guarantee your capital, which is haram in Islam, an investment means it has to be risky. I don't mean reckless, but I mean, theoretically, you should be able to lose in order to profit. Dual
people have to have.
Yeah, the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا الْخَرَاجُ بِالضَّمَانِ, that profit is dependent on you guaranteeing, like you covering loss. So that you got to risk to be eligible for profit. But with lending, there's no risk. I'm lending you money and you're giving me back more money regardless. So the risk is always on the borrower. And so what happens is, the borrower will sometimes fall victim to the risk. Sometimes the risk materializes, which means the rich, no risk, will always get richer. Wow. And the poor that carry the risk will fail at least half the time. I'm just throwing numbers here. And so they'll get poorer. So it separates society like this, right? That's what Plato said. Plato said, it basically, it prepares society for implosion. And, that's where the angry mobs, eventually the hungry mobs, when they get poor enough, they sort of overturn society, and that's the destruction. Wow. And as for Aristotle said, when you separate money from goods, like I'm making money out of money, then people stop caring about quality goods. Like, why should I get good at inventing, developing, manufacturing something if all I need to make money is money? And so craftsmanship loses value. And eventually that catches up with society in irreparable ways. So it's like complex, and it requires like a high level, and like it's, there's layers of abstraction here. And that's the whole point. That are we going to wait till everyone understands and appreciates these angles? Wow. No, Allah said there got to be zakat to keep the money circulating. And there can't be riba, which keeps the money up in the elites at all times.
I love this.
So it doesn't remain as a perpetual circulation among the richest of you. That's it. Pretty simple.
And that's what we're seeing in society. The gap between the elite and the poor is just getting wider, and there is no middle class now, almost, right? Either you're poor or you're rich. The middle class that hovered around 100K, 150K, I mean, if you have 4 kids and you want to send them to college, you're going to take a loan. And then someone's going to be paying a loan on that. And the rich would just...
And ideally, that shouldn't be the case. I mean, obviously, if people are listening to us and saying, wait a minute, did Mufti just say going to college is haram? There are alternatives. The alternatives are seek out all the halal, try to get a scholarship, try to get a work-study program, try to get a halal loan, check ACC, a continuous charity that offers halal loans for those eligible. And if all of that doesn't work...
Or if you can't get a halal loan, call Dr. Shaykh Elshinawy. He has a lot of money. He'll give you some money.
Yeah, of course. I'm sitting on piles of gold and petroleum.
You never know, man.
But what I meant to say is that if all else fails, there are very legitimate contemporary fiqh bodies that say, as a last resort, after exhausting resources, student loan would be forgivable, because otherwise, like you said, with the exorbitant rates of education now, to make this not even an option, even in the cases of like darura, of necessity, which would be like it's a need for an individual, but when you scale it to society, in usul fiqh, we know that a public need is equivalent to a necessity, right? Like it gets compounded exponentially. Therefore, we're not going to tell the whole ummah just accept to be ignorant and uneducated, especially when education is the weapon of the age, right?
Yep.
It's like be vulnerable. No, we're not going to sort of destine or impose on the ummah a lack of education. So check out all the others. If you can't, then you can resort to the resolutions or the recommendations of the
And the
fiqh assemblies
one thing I'd like to just
that permitted it.
sprinkle is that the honest search of the opportunity of halal source would be very important. And the honest, the easiest choice is not the right choice sometimes. The honest search for it, um, especially when it comes to, like, if you say you didn't have water, you want to do ablution, you don't have water, you're gonna use dirt, but you have to honestly search. Is there no
Of course,
water in this?
that's a
Right?
good point.
So in this, what happens is, whenever we give rukhsa to society, and typically society, the awam, myself and people, are always looking for the easiest route out, and not always the easiest route is the right answer. Is that you did honest search, you talk to your uncle, you talk to your cousins, you talk to your brothers, there's a lot of people who don't have uncles and brothers and sisters, right? And they don't have this. But really, if you were thinking about this, was the honest approach. I exerted my resources. Everyone's like, sorry, can't help you, right? And it's, sunnah to take qard, and it's sunnah to give, it's wajib to give back the qard. Like, the Prophet took loans, right? And he give the loans back. You don't give the loans back, then you're sinful. So it's not something like people's like, I feel shame from taking a loan from somebody, but you're saving yourself from a greater harm. And then zero interest on that loan, inshallah. So you have a greater chances of succeeding in that way. And then what Shaykh Shanawi said, "Al-dhurura tataqaddaru biqadri al-dhurura." Then you have no choice. You're gonna, open up some doors and avenues of success. You can't stay behind. Shaykh Shanawi, you did talk, you did touch the point of zakah and the reasoning of zakah. Maybe you can just highlight a little bit of that, because a lot of times when we're giving our zakah, people find it to be burdensome. Like, oh, I'm giving money. Even today in society, we got to give like a large, long dua to a person who's writing a check for zakah. We're like, Jazakumullah khair, Allah bless you in your wealth for giving me this $10,000 check. God, I mean, the reality, I appreciate it. Miftaah appreciates it. Yaqeen appreciates it. Definitely. But Allah appreciates it even more. But my reality is, do we really have to appreciate someone that comes to salah, prays up farad? It's their job obligation. If they don't pray, they're going to be questionable. So, and then the second part of that discussion is the larger, greater, hidden benefit of zakah, and how it should be distributed with the wisdom is behind that.
Yeah, subhanallah. There's so much to say here, but zakah. خذ من أموالهم صدقة تزكيهم وتطهرهم وتزكيهم بها. Take from their wealth a charity. This is zakat, the mandatory charity, right? There are different kinds of charity. Some of them are mandatory. The mandatory is known as zakat, right? Take from their wealth this mandatory charity by which you purify them and you cause them increase. تزكيهم بها. And so it purifies our wealth from haram income. And there's so many different ways that our income could get contaminated. It could be that we're investing in haram investments, right? Like I'm importing or purchasing and selling something that is a haram commodity, like liquor. Just an easy example, right? Or it could be that the income I'm making is through unethical means. I've deceived someone. I've taken someone else's opportunity. I've cut corners at work. I've played around with the hours. There's so many different ways the income could be contaminated. We need to care, because one of the signs of the day of judgment is that a day will come when people do not care about their wealth. Do they acquire it from halal or haram? That's the verbatim hadith. This will continue to grow, and so make sure you're an exception to that as we draw nearer and nearer to the last day. But this zakah, accounts for the part that may be overlooked, even if we're trying. Even if we're trying, because if you know your money is haram, you don't owe zakah on it. You actually owe all of it. Wow. It's not your money, so you're not going to pay charity on something that's not yours. It's not your money. You're not allowed to gain it that way, right?
Yeah.
But the zakah is really about purifying your wealth from what you may not realize has compromised it.
Wow.
Yes, so that's one. Number two, it purifies our souls from the greed which is natural, inborn love. The human being naturally is intense in his love for good. This good in this verse is referring to mal, as the jumhur of the mufassirin mentioned. And the Prophet ﷺ said every ummah will have its unique trial that affects them more than anything else. وَإِنَّ فِتْنَةَ أُمَّتِ الْمَالِ. The trial of my ummah is wealth. Maybe because at the end of time, people will have unprecedented wealth. We live now like in more luxurious ways than 99.9% of human history. Like the most broke person out of us has a digital dial on their wall that they can sort of like play with the temperature. The kings of the empires and the emperors didn't have this stuff, right? Your couch is nicer than their throne, guys. So, that's another thing that begets greed, because the nature of this world is that it's sticky. And then, or some scholars said it's like hot, it's like salt water. The more you drink, the thirstier you get. And so the more you enjoy this dunya, this world, which money is a big part of, the more of it you hold on to, the more of it you feel dependent on. So it gets rid of that greed through giving it up, even in small amounts. Like zakah is 2.5% of your holdings, not your money. So just even that little amount has profound, psychological, or should I say spiritual benefit, that it sort of purifies you, take from their wealth to purify them and to cause them increase. It increases you in generosity. It increases you in good reputation also, right? It increases you all in love, when like sort of the warmth in societies, when we're exchanging money, rich with poor, no strings attached, right? No shaming, no delaying. This increases the social fabric's strength.
Yep.
So there's so much wisdom in zakah, but even financially, it increases the economic thriving of a society when zakah, because think about it, zakah is the money that's paid out of the money you've held. So if you would have put it into the system, you wouldn't have had to pay zakah on it.
Yep.
So it perpetuates ethical, of course, but investment, like invest your money.
Yeah, the money keeps on circulating.
From Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu an, he used to say, ittajiru بأموال اليتامى لا تأكلها الصدقة. Invest the wealth that you're holding for the orphan.
Wow.
Because like if you have an orphan under your care, you're holding the money. They don't owe zakah if they're a kid, but you as the caretaker know that the zakah is due on their money, not of them, but on their money. So you got to pay it. And which means that it's going to lose
value,
2.5% every year. So grow it for them. So he says, invest the wealth of the orphan so it's not consumed by charity.
Wow.
Because you think about, like, is this a loophole? It's not a loophole. When you're doing this, their money it helps against the inflation over the years, but also other people are going to be getting jobs now and so on and so forth, and society is going to be progressing. It's beautiful.
Beautiful. You're investing, you're getting 10-15% back, and you're giving charity of 2.5% gain.
Yeah, you're creating sort of like a rotation of wealth.
I love it. I love it. People sometimes, it's great to just have the mindset of sami'na wa ata'na. Allah knows what He's saying to us. We believe it, right? And but it's also great where we find in the Quran for good people, reasonable people, to learn the asrar. Even sometimes the wisdoms of these applications in our deen. We're not coming from a skeptical perspective. We're coming from a gaining. Where Ibrahim alayhi salam is alam tara alladhi hajja Ibrahim fi rabbi an atahu Allahu al-mulk. Right away, he's able to refute and in a very logical way Namrud. Yeah. And where Namrud, he thinks he's smart, he's God. He goes, grabs a free person, kills him, kicks the person out of incarceration, frees him. Like, look, I do the same thing. So Ibrahim Islam realizes, like I said, this guy is beyond ignorant and arrogant. This is in the light, like really, like if you're telling me that there's no God and you're God, so I don't have to prove to you. You have to prove to me because you're claiming this, right? And
Place
bring
of
the
confidence is very important. And
huh,
like you
sorry?
said, those like sort of the I don't want to use a firearms example. I'm from Pennsylvania. It's a big gun state. But the more bullets you have in your clip of like the wisdoms of the deen, the more confidence you have, even if you don't use it, right?
Subhanallah.
And so, like, I always think about that story you just mentioned, Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he told him, you know, my Lord gives life and takes life. So this guy pulled off that lousy, like, I killed this man and I freed that man. I do it too. He didn't stop. He didn't need to stop and say, no, that's not what I meant. He didn't have to do that. He's like, all right, I got one more. I got one more for you. Right?
Yeah, you're
And
Pam.
so, yeah, here's the sun. Bring it from the other side. And then he's stuck.
Yeah,
So it's not about being argumentative. It's about having, as you said in the beginning, a depth to our appreciation of some of the wisdoms. Yes, we're going to stay humble. We can't know all the wisdoms because we're not the most wise. Only Allah is Al-Hakim. But the more wisdoms, and there is a lot, so much, the more wisdoms we learn, the more wisdoms we reflect on, the more confident we'll be in our deen, even if we don't get into a combative intellectual, you know, verbal exchange or like written exchange with someone. It'll keep you in your deen. You know, Ibn Taymiyyah would say this, rahimahullah, that al-i'jaz al-tashri'i, the fact that the legislations of the deen, the teachings of the deen are inimitable, is one of the greatest ways to feed your faith or even
wow.
convince someone to bring them to the faith. And I think now more than ever,
Well,
like when you see how societies are being so arbitrary and so dogmatic and falling apart based on these like sort of liquid morality. It's like something new every day, right? The structure of Islamic, I always think about the story of this brother in my masjid. I came out of Jumu'ah and I saw him sitting. He had taken a Quran from me weeks back. And I told him, hey, man, you Muslim yet? Like I was sort of like joking with him. He's like, no, not yet. And I'm like, he just sat through Jumu'ah again. So I'm like, come on, man, what's taking so long? Just, you know, take the plunge. And so he's like, you know, Islam is strict. And I was about to refute, sort of like, no, it's actually not that strict. And you got to look at it from a different lens. But before I could even speak up, he said, and that's what I love about it. I'm like, what?
wow.
He's like, my father ruined our family due to his alcoholism for the last 20 years. And the only system I found, or the only reason I believe I will not do that to my family one day when I have a family, he's a young kid, freshman in college, he said, is Islam's zero tolerance policy on alcohol. Like, Allah knows us. Don't take a sip. Don't sit at the table, right? That detailed framework for how to not fall into alcoholism only exists in Islam, only. Right? So, and again, we're not going to know all the wisdom, so be careful. Like, Allah spared us. Like, you know, I think of the most basic rules, like pork. The Muslims didn't wait till, you know, this century when we figured out that pig has parasites in it. And no, like before we knew the wisdom, we stopped eating pork. Alhamdulillah, we've been sort of pork free for 1400 years, right? We've been alcohol free for the most part, 1400 years. It's such a blessing. And by the way, we don't actually know that is the reason why pork is haram. You got to be careful. There could be 15 reasons and we only discovered one. And if this universe lasts long enough, we might discover a few more.
Wow.
We know some of the wisdom only. So look for it, appreciate it, deepen your appreciation of the wisdom, and always stay humble in your confidence in Islam that I don't know all of it. I never will, because it's just too awesome to be fully encompassed.
You know, in financial humility, you know, social humility, these are easy levels. Like, you know, people will make you humble. Like, you're not rich, you're not you're not academically. But one of the hardest levels of taking a shot down humility is intellectual. Like when you think you know it all, like you open an equation, you gotta figure it out, solve it. Now we have so many ways to solve things, you know, like because of all the technology around. And so when you feel like you don't understand this, and Allah SWT, He, like, from the intellectual humility aspect, even the Prophet ﷺ was humbled on this aspect. You know, when they asked the Prophet some 3 questions, Ahl Makkah, when the Jews asked these three questions, Ashab al-Kahf, Dhul Qarnayn, and they asked him, Yuruh. And in one surah, two questions are answered. Two questions are mentioned and answered. The two questions are mentioned in Surah Al-Kahf, which are answered. And the one question that's not answered is not in Surah Al-Kahf, it's in Surah Al-Isra.
Yeah.
For a particular reason, it's in even a different surah. And Allah SWT, like you said, it's very fascinating. But Shaykh, that's why even I'm not going to go to the taqlid discussion, but like even humility of scholarly opinion is also lacking in society today. Like, how should I pray my salah, and following a position of either Imam Ahmad or Imam Shafi'i, because just like people don't have the intellect to rationalize the glory of the beauty of Islam, and from non-Muslim or atheist or skeptic to Islam, I feel like there's, even in the fiqh discussion, people have just stretched the goalposts. You talk about the goalposts. Like, okay, the first thing I do when I play soccer with my kids, I'm sure you play soccer, jiu-jitsu, all these crazy sports, you set the rules, right? Even in fighting, there's rules. You don't hit someplace, even the guy's down, you don't knee him. This is fighting. So even in soccer, the first thing we do to enjoy a game with a kid, we put like an object on the right and the object on the left. Between this is the height, this is the soccer. If you don't,
these are the parameters. Yep.
These are parameters. And if you tell a kid, you know what, I'm just gonna shoot at you, the kid's not gonna know where to, we don't know where to, this is not a game, Dad, right?
Yeah.
The reality is that the parameters were made not to restrict us or not to make us feel confined intellectually, but to enjoy the glory, the richness in these parameters that Allah had provided. So as a child diving right and left, I know the ball's not going to go further. I know the ball's not going to go high. If it does, I don't have to worry about it. Similarly with Islam, in the Prophet Sallallahu the Prophet, Allah SWT made it so reasonable. And again, like the intellectual humility, even in the aspect of fiqh, just understand, like nowadays, young people, I don't know what age, like with this millennial generation, like they just like, whatever, man. Someone said this, Shaykh Abdullah said this, Shaykh Shinawi said this, Shaykh Qardawi said this, Shaykh Taqi Uthmani said this, so-and-so said this, someone on TikTok said this. I mean, why isn't that there? And that's making it very difficult. And I really I think teaching fiqh as a class is it's so important. Like, what? Like, people don't want that. People don't want to be restricted by the intellect. Why can't we? So that's happening.
And you can just not prematurely. Like if you walk into kindergarten and you're done with kindergarten, you want to ask a PhD question. No, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to explain it to you because you don't even have the tools to have that conversation yet. Yeah. This is not arrogant. This is not like a bullying plea to authority. This is not sort of like an exclusive club. No, it's called qualification. This is not a plea to authority. This is a request for you to have some humility, that this is called a premature request of you to think that you're going to be able to do this. And even not just like the average person, but even students of knowledge, it's human nature is impatient. And so they jump the gun on this, and it gets very problematic. And so my shuyukh used to always say, I think my device is about to die. Forgive me if I sign out or I fall out. But he used to say that one of the most dangerous things in the world is knowledge without faith. Wow. When you don't have enough iman, because how does faith play into humility? At the end of the day, you're not trying to promote yourself. You're not trying to be right. You're not trying to grab everyone's attention. That's why people like to be eccentric, like outside the box. I want to be the one that has this unique view, and like be sensationalist or be, distinguish myself. And it's self-promotion at the end of the day. It's all like, haram meals that your ego eats. Well, I want this haram meal.
It's like that daughter or son that can speak back to a dad, and everybody's watching, and the spectator is like, oh, because a daughter or son speaking back to an authority like a father, they feel like that gives me this power, like no one's saying anything about it. I can say that. Nobody else can say it. None of my siblings can say it.
And they absolutely can. But ما يلفظ من قول إلا لديه رقيب عتيد. Yeah, Allah gave you the ability to say whatever you want.
Exactly.
Because that is what makes the day of judgment a fair day. that if you didn't have the chance to do evil, then you don't get credit for doing good either. There's a choice, but these choices will not be forgotten. Every choice you make, every word we utter will echo for eternity.
Wow.
And so we need to take things, seriously. Yeah, absolutely. We can sing freedom until Yom al-Qiyamah. But at the end of the day, you will realize that we also have the freedom to destroy ourselves, Allah forbid.
Sheikh, I know we have to wrap up. Your device is telling us time is over. That's the right answer here. Before we leave, Sheikh, did you have a journey in this discussion? I'm like the way you are fascinating the whole listeners, all the listeners that are watching. I'm sure as growing up as a youth in America, there must have been places and times where like, man, I got to
Yeah. So this is a journey of yaqeen. What do I mean by that? Unless you're certain that Islam is true and from Allah, and that therefore there must be wisdom, you're not going to go looking for the wisdom. Like if you doubt that the wisdom is there, you're not going to look for it. Right? And so unless you're certain that there's wisdom, you will never be able to find it.
Wow.
You can call it a bias, like, oh, you already assume there's wisdom. Yeah, it is a bias. That bias is called fadlullahi alayna, the fact that Allah made me favor faith.
Wow.
I agree. I don't believe Allah does that randomly. I believe those who are looking for it will get it. وَمَا كَانَ لِنَفْسٍ أَن تُؤْمِنَ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. No soul will have yaqeen and belief without Allah's permission. So now that Allah has permitted me to look at it that way, I prefer to look at it that way, but it's not arbitrary, random prefer. For good reasons now, this is my sort of orientation. Yes, that's why I look at it that way. I'm positive that this is from the Most Wise. Now let me go and bask in the radiance of some of this wisdom.
Wow. But again, my question is, where did you get this? Where did you have this journey in your personal life to like go back and it's like, man, was it in high school? Was it in college?
Yeah, I mean, I told my mom, I was 13. I mentioned in the beginning of the Prophethood book, actually, that like, mama, every parent tells their kid this religion is right. It's just our word against theirs. What makes us any different?
Wow.
And so she said, like, basically she said, trust me. And in my head, I was like, really sorry, but I can't do that. No, not possible. Not, like she has amazing faith, natural faith, tabarakallah.
Yeah.
But raised in my era, in public school, in postmodern times, I needed to self-discover. I need to figure it out for myself. And so over the years, I realized after like, I never left Islam, bifadlillah, alhamdulillah. But after I was really exploring with what I think is an open mind, I realized in the end that I was holding Islam to a higher standard because I was telling myself, be fair, Muhammad, what's the chances that Islam, the religion you were born into, is actually the right religion? What are the odds? So because I'm trying to like offset that bias, that natural bias, I was harder on Islam than I was on the other religions, and Islam still passed.
Wow.
Still won.
Wow.
That's the idea.
Mashallah.
I was like, come on, Muhammad, you're being unfair to Islam to like continue
you
this.
Were hard. You were hard on Islam. Like, yeah, why this? Why this? Why this? And then you got to answer like, bam.
And I was like, wait a minute, nothing else. It's almost like, where does the water flow? The water flows in the path of least resistance.
Mm-hmm.
This is where the water flows, guys. Everything else is truly a dead end, truly illogical, truly contrary to reason.
Wow. We I don't know if you teach a class on this, but you should teach this subject. Shaykh Elshinawy should be taught at the knowledge retreat, or maybe with yaqeen or some. This can't be just echoed for 1 hour here and written in an article for a few hours for people to read. This has to happen in a classroom. And I truly believe when you put people in front of you who have strong faith, they will have depth in their faith. And not only they will have depth, they will be able to answer to others. They're my own family, friends. And those who are on the fringes and they're shy to speak. Like how many times, like even like a kid in the back of the class is like, if I ask this question, people are gonna think I'm a kafir, and then and of course you're not, because Ibrahim is like, like how do you give life to Ibrahim? Half a page earlier is proving
he wanted to increase in faith.
Exactly. So there's so many people in our community, as a scholar who reads Quran, Hadith, studies, reads, I'm sitting here like, we need to have this conversation more. We need more people to learn about this. And I'm sure there's some non-Muslims. What is happening today, Shaykh Elshinawy? Non-Muslim, like you give the example of the guy whose father was alcoholic, are walking into Islam. Literally, today a girl came to my community from high school, just became Muslim. Yesterday at Isha Salah, your masjid, my masjid, people are just walking in.
Everywhere. The numbers are rising everywhere, and we're not even doing much work at all.
Nothing. We're doing nothing. We're nothing. I don't think. I said to my khutbah, I was like, 80% of people who became Muslim, we should take zero credit for it. Like they ordered, literally, the guy came for Isha.
Fair is fair.
He came for Isha. Ordered Quran on Amazon. Amazon, like Jeff Bezos should get the credit for that one. I think Sheikh, he warned us before he was going to get kicked out. But truly, it was an honor to have Sheikh online, and he blessed us with this beautiful session. Beautiful. And brothers and sisters, if you want to learn more about the discussion that Shaykh Elshinawy was speaking about, you have to go and check out the Yaqeen website. Yaqeen Institute is doing unbelievable, groundbreaking research in a topic of faith and conviction, dismantling doubts. And the work that Shaykh Umar Suleiman, Shaykh Elshinawy is there, Sister Dr. Tasneem Aqiq, the great work that is put together, and many more brothers and sisters that have dedicated their time. You know, Dr. Jonathan Brown also helped and worked so much with them, and list goes on and on and on. So we are in a lucky era where there are people who were raised Muslims in the West and then saw these speculations and skeptical discussions, and they saw the Muslim youth struggling, and they didn't just say, well, we're going to tell them, say Allahu la ilaha illa al-hayyul qayyum, or Qul huwa Allahu ahad, whenever time you have this, feeling in your heart. Right, we're going to put this into paper, because the opposite parties are not speaking just sentences or words, but there's a machine, there's a propaganda of pulling youth and families and people away from faith, whether it's through trauma, whether it's through intellect, whether it's just through emotional abuse, many ways. So Yaqeen has done great work, and we should support them financially. Our prayers, use their materials, share with your children, even in schools, in high schools and colleges, open them up. And even if you find 20% of your answers in these articles or these videos or these snippets, it'll open avenues to more and more access and great opportunity. So we're indebted to the great people there. May Allah reward them. May Allah bless them. And again, we hope to see you guys continuously on our Friday Night Live. I hope you guys enjoyed the beautiful session, and please make dua for Shaykh Mohammad Elshinawy. And like I was saying, I'm trying to convince them to do something like this in person. I can just see the great magnitude of benefit to everybody in the ummah. Guys, from my side, it's quite late. It's past 11, and you guys must be bored listening to me. I really appreciate you guys staying awake with me this late. My dear friend Ridwan Abdul Razak, I don't know how you're tolerating even listening to me. You've been listening to me all past few days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You've been in my community. Appreciate the love and time from everyone. Keep us in your du'as. As you guys must know, that Mufti Abdul Wahab is traveling with Miftaah and Yasir Qadhi, Sheikh Yasir Qadhi, in Chicago, just finishing a seerah program, over 1,000 people. Tomorrow and this weekend, they'll be in Virginia and Boston and Virginia. If you go back and check the Instagram page of Miftaah in the social media, you will see all their activities. Miftaah will be coming somewhere near your city or your community. Please attend the programs. Miftaah has courses starting online for Arabic, for ilm, knowledge, for hadith, and different subjects. Join the online platform. If not, at least just follow us on Friday Night Live. Make dua for us. Take care. Good night. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.